About what is Agile. What is Agile? It really depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a business analyst or an IT person or a development manager or a company executive, you will all get different answers. And there are a lot of answers out there where it's a little bit confusing on what really Agile means. Personally, to me, Agile is a philosophy and a way of thinking that's guided by 4 values and 12 principles. That being said, for the rest of the course, I want you to think about Agile as a mindset over a framework, process, or a methodology. Looking at the history of Agile, it was coined back in 2001. 17 highly opinionated expert software developers got together in Utah to discuss what are some of the things that they were doing in software development that was working. Some folks there were from Scrum, some had really good experience with Lean and had been able to make Lean work. Others had experience in XP. And there were some other ones that had some other form of these methodologies. That is the reason why they couldn't really agree on one methodology or one framework on what to call Agile. However, they agreed on the 4 values and 12 principles. And that is how the Agile Manifesto was originated. If you go back to the agilemanifesto.org and really dig in and look at what does Agile mean, it pretty much gets summarized by 4 values and 12 principles. And it's as simple as that. So for me, Agile is more of a mindset and a belief system. If I had to explain Agile to somebody who had no software development experience, here's how I would do it. In this day and age, everybody has some exposure to using websites or using application in their phones. So let's just simulate a very simple example. You have X amount of dollars and you want to build an app. Let's say this is a game that you're trying to build. And you have certain amount of money and you hire Vivek and the team from the Agile coach to build this game for you. How would you want to get your product delivered to you? In what fashion? Would you want value in a weekly basis, or would you want us to give you a lot of documents and wireframes and different ways of doing it, except the working software? Obviously the working software. How would you want us to work with you since you are the customer? Would you want us to collaborate with you and come up with on how you should build this game? Or would you want us to lock into a contract where we only deliver to you what you gave us initially when you had only so much idea about your game? Another example, this game that you had thought of, you had a specific plan for this. But a month into it, let's say there's another competition that has already developed a really good game that has all these features. However, you get a pretty good advice from an investor who wants you to tweak a few things, and that makes your game still viable in the market. Would you want your software development team at theagilecoach.com to be able to respond to your needs in the change in the requirements, or would you want us to give you a hard time about, hey, you gave us this roadmap, this plan, and we're going to stick to it? Obviously, you want us to be flexible. So that is what it means to Agile from a manifesto perspective. And we're going to go into deep and explore what the principle actually mean. Another thing that I can think about is estimating. Whenever it comes to estimating the work from a development team perspective, sometimes team members get hung up on how big this item is. And when we come to that situation, we are going to value the interaction among the team members and talking through what are the complexities of this work and why do we think this is so complicated. So we're going to value that interaction more than the actual story point or how big the story is. The second value of the Agile Manifesto is working software over comprehensive documentation. It doesn't mean that we don't need to have a documentation. In fact, it can be super frustrating if there's no documentation, and it can be really hard for the developers or customers to kind of navigate through the software. However, a key thing that you want to pay attention to in this value is comprehensive. Let's not spend a lot of time just writing documents, because the main deliverable is the software. Even when you're thinking from a capturing business requirements perspective, one of the main things that comes out of gathering requirements is the shared understanding. What this principle says is you could create the shared understanding by actually just having more conversation among the team members and with the stakeholders and potentially even the customers. And one way you can accomplish this shared understanding of the software is by creating small increments of software and putting it in the hands of the internal stakeholders or the customer, so that you can gain feedback from them on what they exactly want out of the software. Again, if you go back to the first line of the Agile manifesto, it is about uncovering better ways, which means learning better ways. So the emphasis here is for teams to learn. One of the ways that you can learn is by failing faster. So when you create small increments of software and you put it in the hands of customer without focusing too much on creating a huge piece of documentation, this actually allows teams to create something really fast and learn fast. So in conclusion, we want to create more working software, we want to learn faster, and we want to create shared understanding. And yes, the documentation is important, but let's just not go all crazy on documents. The third value of the Agile manifesto is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. The key thing that you want to keep in mind in this value is customer collaboration. We want to collaborate with our customer because we want to delight our customer, because we want them to come back to us and rely in our expertise for developing software. However, we want to change the way that we write our contracts or agreements. In the past, most of the times, most of these contracts are written based on business requirements or functional requirement documents, which throughout the course of the project, it is so hard to predict, and usually these requirements change. And there goes the contract, where now as a development team, we have to kind of go based on the contract, and the client will actually have us execute on the contract, which it's a lose-lose situation. Versus what we are suggesting is have a contract in a way where we're keeping customer success in our mind. It's actually not fair for development teams to ask for all the requirements from the customer or the client in day one. They're coming to you in the first place for help because they want this piece of software to be built by you. So rather than putting them into a strong contract, we want to collaborate with them and help them understand what they need in the software so that they can really delight their customer. So this principle is saying that instead of having a strict contract up front, collaboration is the key. Work with the customer or the client throughout the project, and you want to create a win-win situation where if your customer or your client wins, then you win. The last value of the manifesto is responding to change over following a plan. This value just means that having a plan is very important. It's almost silly not to have a plan. In software development, we have all kinds of plannings. However, less value on being ready and being able to respond to the changes if they actually happen. Traditionally, when we are planning for projects, what we are saying is if the conditions of the universe didn't change between now and the moment, what kind of things would we do in order to accomplish this project? And we write those things down and we talk about it and we document it, and we can actually throw that piece of plan away. Because most likely, if you're developing a complex piece of software, something will change and then the plan will not be useful. So planning is very important. We need some kind of plan, but we need to be able to respond to change as they happen in a complex environment. So think about any kind of hurricane that actually happens around the world. There was one that happened here in the United States, was called Maria, and the mayor came to the TV and said, we're gonna do this, 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 and this is our plan, this is how we're getting ready. However, he said that all this is important. However, when the hurricane actually comes, we want to be able to respond to the hurricane versus just following a plan that we had. And he said another quote by Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched on their face. So we can have all kind of nice plans set up, but it's important to respond to the change over just follow and stick to the plan if something has actually changed. So these are the 4 values of Agile for you. You want to really think about how can you apply these values and be agile in your team or an organization, because it's a mindset. It's about an agreement that you can form within the company, and people can really think about these values when they are making decisions in their day-to-day lives in software development environments. They're talking on almost on a daily basis. And the other thing to remember is we're not talking about business people asking developer, when is this going to be done? When is this going to be done?
Sure.
We're talking about collaboration. What are we building? Has anything changed? So that kind of communication is happening throughout.
Awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes the business analyst becomes a bottleneck, in a traditional waterfall methodology. And with Agile, it removes the blinders from the developer and allows them to get their questions answered directly from the source rather than going through a layer, which doesn't really add much value.
Yep, it just helps everybody to get on the same page on what they're building.
Agile principle number 5. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So in summary of principle number 5, it's all about building projects around motivated individuals. So Vivek, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, Jeremy, the key concept here is there's no project manager trying to ask you, what did you do yesterday? Or like, how much have you done? Like, no status reports. The idea here is, hire a really good, motivated group of individuals, part of the team who are cross-functional, and actually give them space to actually do amazing work. And when we say work, not just develop software, but also to solve problems for the company or the client.
Yeah, it's always about creating value, right? Yeah, and so I think the big thing to keep in mind here, if you're going to work in an Agile team, is regardless of your title, these teams are cross-functional. That means they cross over roles. Your duties and responsibilities are going to evolve and change, and that is because everybody's collaborating together to try to realize that end value. Agile principle number 6. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Well, summarizing principle number 6 is pretty easy. Face-to-face communication. Vivek, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, what this means is instead of writing a big piece of requirement document and giving to a developer, we are encouraging more face-to-face communication. Or even worse, creating a ticket or messaging them and bothering them all the time. Just having meetings face-to-face where you are able to communicate what you need.
Having a conversation. What a novel idea.
Yep, and also if you look at all the Agile meetings, it actually encourages face-to-face communication as well.
Agile principle number 7. Working software is the primary measure of progress. To summarize, working software is key. Vivek?
This principle is just saying that whenever we're thinking about progress, let's measure that in terms of our working software. What have we built? Not how much analysis we have done or how many pages of documentation we have created or how many mock-up pages we've created. This is purely working software.
And that makes sense. And while we may be creating models as in part of that and have them attached to our various items, the working software is really what we're driving towards and what will create the most value.
Definitely.
Agile principle number 8. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Principle number 8 is all about sustainable development. Vivek, what do you think?
So, Jeremy, remember those traditional days where business analysts is doing all kind of analysis, they're stressed, and they hit their deadline, they finish, they give it to a developer. Now, development team is stressed out, and they're trying to make the ends meet, hit the deadline, and then finally they're done. Then it goes to tester. it's testers' time to be stressful now. They're testing everything, and then implementation time comes in, and everybody is stressed.
Yep.
So in Agile, what we're trying to do is, instead of this big bang thing where everybody's working in phases, we're talking about, okay, what are key features, what we need to do, what is team's capacity, and think about a sustainable pace that team can develop in.
Yeah, and I think that's really important that because in Agile, the whole team is getting together. So it makes it more sustainable because it's a cross-functional team. So everybody's able to help move that particular project forward to meet the value. Agile principle number 9. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. And to summarize, it's all about technical excellence. Vivek, what do you think?
I want to talk a little bit about quality in this principle. So if you build something and if there is no quality in place, you cannot build anything on top of it. So it's going to be harder for you to be agile in the future. So Agile says, think about quality, think about technical excellence as you're building certain product.
Absolutely, yeah. You evolve those features and functionality you've built, right? You're making slight changes to them and additions to them to help drive value later on. If you've got problems early on in that design or in that initial quality, you're going to have problems for a long time. Agile principle number 10. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. Summarizing number 10 is really easy. Simplicity. Vivek, what do you think?
When I think about this principle, Jeremy, I think about Google's landing page. So when you go to Google's landing page, it is just one search button and it's a white screen. And it is beautiful on the way that it works. If just because you have more and more features, it doesn't make a software pleasant to use. So the idea here is in Agile, you're also thinking about the outcome. Like what kind of outcome are you looking? And you can do that by building less and less and delivering more.
Got it. So making sure that you're delivering value on everything that you're building, not just building something or creating something to create it.
Definitely.
Agile principle number 11. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Principle number 11 is all about self-organizing teams. Vivek?
Yeah, so in Agile teams, where the teams are self-organizing and cross-functional, meaning depending on what kind of project you're working on, you're going to have people with the right skill sets. And that's what a team is formed of, is everybody in the team has unique skill sets and they have what it takes to make this project successful. So when they need something, a question about an architecture, they already have somebody in that team so they can actually talk to somebody versus borrowing somebody from somebody else.
Yeah, I know in Waterfall or in other methodologies, a lot of times you need to go ask a manager, hey, can I have somebody from your team, from your testing team to help out with this? And usually it takes a long time. Where in Agile, with it being self-organizing, if you need somebody, you can go tap them on the shoulder and see if they have availability to come help your team or to join the team, potentially.
Definitely.
Agile principle number 12. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. And last but not least, reflect and adjust. Vivek, what do you think?
This is actually one of the key principles of Agile, one of my favorite principles of Agile as well. So as you're working in a product as a team, you're going to learn different things about each other, ways of working. So at each interval, like every 2-3 weeks, you're getting back and you're looking at what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we improve. And this is a key principle of Agile.
Yeah, and I think in Waterfall, reflect and adjust is there as well. Like Waterfall or any other methodologies, they want to reflect and get better and change and adapt. But the challenge is in a Waterfall project, you have that at the end of the project. That could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from the time you start a project. And it's just too long. You don't get enough time to reflect and adjust. Where Agile, with it being more iterative, every few weeks you're actually able to look in, see how it's going, and make adjustments as necessary to make the team even more successful.
The 12 Agile principles are so important in Agile that we've covered it very early in this course. The principles help to give a foundation to Agile and help you to really understand what makes up an Agile mindset. Included as part of this lecture are some downloadable resources. So head out to the resources and download them. This document right here, the 12 Agile Principles, is available. You can download it, print it off, and utilize it as a reference material and as a resource on the job, during your studies, and for the next practice activity that we're going to be getting to in the next lecture. Agile principles are key to understanding the Agile mindset. As we said in the previous lecture, where we provided you some resources that you can download for your reference. In this lecture, we're going to explain an activity that we'd like you to go through, and it'll help you to not only remember what those Agile principles are, but it'll also help you critically think about them and hear some others' opinions on various Agile principles. For this activity, we want you to go through the 12 Agile principles and pick out what you feel are the top 5 principles. And the order doesn't matter, you don't need to rank them, but just choose out what are the top 5 Agile principles you think that are crucial to successful Agile projects. Now this can be based on your Agile experience, this can be based on other business experience that you have, or this could be just based on opinion on what we said throughout the 3 lectures where we discuss the Agile principles. So select your top 5 Agile principles and think through why you feel that that principle is that important. Once you get completed with that critical thinking exercise, then we would like you to head out to the course Q&A and actually create a question titled My Top 5 Agile Principles, and either copy paste your results in there or retype your results as to what your top 5 Agile principles are and why you feel that way. For step 3, we want you to review other people's opinions. So the first thing you're going to do is conduct a search in the Q&A for the My Top 5 Agile Principles question, and then you can read and or comment on those various student submissions. So you don't need to look through all of them, but just get a good idea and read through a few, get some other opinions outside of your own based on their experiences. As well, then go to the next lectures and watch the videos where myself, Jeremy, the BA guide, and Vivek, the Agile coach, will go over our thoughts and our opinions on what our top 5 Agile principles are. We can't wait to see your submissions and your comments in the Q&A, and we look forward to sharing our opinions in the next couple lectures. Jeremy Ashmener here, the BA Guide, here to share the results of my top 5 Agile Principles activity. Now, before I start, there's no right or wrong answer. Because of my opinion is this does not mean that your opinion needs to be this. This is all opinion. All 12 Agile principles are crucially important, but these are just the top 5 according to my experience. So number 1, and again, this is in no particular order, but number 1 is deliver value faster. The biggest reason Agile got created was because the traditional methodologies such as waterfall weren't delivering value until the end of the project. So there was a whole bunch of work, a whole bunch of effort, a whole bunch of money being put into projects up front, and the business wasn't seeing the value until weeks, more than likely months, more than likely years later down the road. So the deliver value faster principle, that we're going to deliver that value to the business much sooner and have them realize those benefits and that value, is critically important and is the reason why that is one of the first principles on my top 5 list. Next comes welcome change. Again, with traditional methodologies, the business really gets sick of hearing no, because in the traditional methodology, you have various stages, and once you get past a certain stage, you can't go back. So once you get done with the requirements, you get into design, you're not supposed to go back and add requirements to it. Once you get into development, you can't go back and redesign it. And it just makes it very difficult for the business because the business is always evolving, right? All their needs are always changing. And so the Agile principle of welcome change is saying, regardless where you're at in the project, if you're at the beginning, the middle, or the end, business is going to change. You need to welcome that change and look at how you can make that adjustment to help the business realize the value of that change. So my second top 5 Agile principle is welcome change. The next Agile principle of my top 5 is work together daily. And this is all about the business working with other project team members such as the business analysts and the developers and the quality assurance members, etc. So you're working together daily, having conversations, making decisions, and moving things forward. Too often in the waterfall or traditional methodologies, because of the various stages, everybody's siloed. The business analyst is very siloed. They may be working with the business, but then they need to translate all those details to the developer. That developer's siloed. They work only with the business analyst who translates the business needs. So if there's questions, the business analyst has to play the middleman. Agile is saying, you work together. Everybody's going to work together, and everybody's going to work together every single day. We are one big team driving towards one specific goal. We need to work together daily. Next is working software is key. And I picked this one because a lot of times in traditional methodologies, as you're working through and gathering requirements and creating models, you feel like you're really making good progress. And you are. But you have to remember that when you're doing that, you're not actually creating any value for the business at this point. You're just creating the models and the requirements to then be able to create some type of solution that then can create value. Where Agile is a little different is they're only focused on that working software. They don't care about all the models and requirements you have to do in the back end. That's all just means to get to that working software, that working solution. So the working software is the primary focus and the primary measure of how that project is moving forward. And last but not least, I chose reflect and adjust. Agile being a very iterative process, it allows the team to reflect on what happened in that last time box, that last iteration, and make adjustments to their processes, make adjustments to roles and responsibilities, make adjustments to how they're delivering that value to the business. By making those adjustments, you're able to do those lessons learned over and over and over throughout a project. And by the end of the project, or really by the middle of the project, most project teams are feeling like a well-oiled machine. Everybody just knows what they're doing. They're working through. A lot of the issues and problems and challenges have been resolved, and everybody's just striving forward to that end result. On more traditional projects, like a waterfall type of project, you only get to do a lessons learned really at the end of that project. So after the 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that project length is, then you sit down and do a lessons learned. But you're thinking back through 6 months, 2 years, 3 years to do a lessons learned. Good luck remembering all the challenges that happen and making adjustments. That's one of the bummers. But the other bummer is you don't get to utilize the lessons learned that you learned on that project that you just got finished with, because that project's done. Now you need to try to apply those to the next project. So again, that's just my opinion. Again, no right or wrong answers. I can't wait to see your opinion in your posts in the Q&A. So if you haven't done that, highly recommend you hop out there, put your top 5 Agile principles and some reasoning out there in a Q&A post, and we look forward to reading and commenting on all of those that we can. Thanks a lot.
Hello everyone, in this section I'm going to talk to you about my top 5 Agile principle. One of the top Agile principles that resonates with me is welcome change. Welcome changes to requirements even late in project. Agile processes harness that change for the customer's competitive advantage. This fits right into one of the manifesto principles that says responding to change over following a plan. I think this has a lot of utility because change is inevitable. Whenever we are solving complex problems in 21st century, technology changes, ideas changes, market changes, competitive product changes, And even customer desires can change. Customers have a lot of options these days, and the market is very, very competitive. So if you don't keep customers' competitive edge on mind, the customers can leave us. So the key thing here is we should learn how to adapt to change. And we have to be obsessed with creating value to our customer, our user base, and stakeholders by adapting to the changes in the market. Working software is key. Working software is the primary measure of success. I am very passionate about this principle. I think this is a really important principle because working software is real work. Working software is value. Nobody really pays for documentation or wireframes. So this principle just shapes the mindset of the team that we should be more focused on creating actual software and put it in the hands of the customer, because customers can give us feedback on working software, not our documentation or wireframes. Another reason why I like this feature is because traditionally teams used to start working on all the requirements at the same time. But here what we are focusing on is we're picking up the simplest, smallest item that might work, then we're making it work, and then we are having customer use it and learning if the customer loves it or not. And if they don't like it, then we can improve on it. My third favorite principle is face-to-face communication. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. When I was working as a Scrum Master for a remote team, this was a real challenge. One of the team members was in New Jersey, another 2 team members were in India, and 4 of the other team members were in St. Louis. Initially, we actually didn't do the face-to-face communication because of some security issues we couldn't get on WebEx, and also because people were not used to. And that created a lot of challenges because whenever you can't see the other team member, there is lack of empathy. For example, 80% of the communication happens via body language, and we miss all that if it's a distributed team. If you look at an event like Daily Stand-Up, we say Daily Stand-Up, but really we can harness the agility or the agile mindset by actually being more face-to-face. So even if the teams are in different locations, they could get on Zoom or WebEx or Skype and really do a quick touch base, for example, for a stand-up, and same thing for a retrospective. If you can see that person, you can get a lot more on what they're trying to say, their concerns, their excitement. My fourth favorite one is simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. This means that we have to start with something that we know that will work, instead of just trying to build up everything and adding all the bells and whistles based on a hypothesis where you don't even know if customers are gonna love that piece of feature or not. So that happens a lot in organizations coming from waterfall, because you're just given a requirement. People are just creating software based on that requirement without really having that much of touch point with customers. I like this principle because it helps company and the team members really think in terms of not building features that won't bring value to the customers and the company. And it is very disempowering for team members to work on a project or a few features for a few weeks or a few months, and then knowing that that feature is not going to be used by anybody or people hate that feature. And lastly, my fifth favorite principle, setting out retrospective sessions on a regular basis when teams are working together. That can be really helpful. Retrospectives are amazing. When I was new in my Scrum Master role, I didn't really know how to facilitate one. But as I learned how to facilitate a retrospective, I saw a lot of the challenges and pain points that team faced was coming out. And this was a very impactful meeting for team members. Not only based on what they're building and what they've delivered, but also like how they're working with each other. Are they liking each other? Is something coming in the way that needs to be talked? What are some of the team blind spots? Those are things that we actually used to discuss in a team retrospective or a iteration or sprint retrospective that brought a lot of value to the team.
As Vivek mentioned in an earlier lecture, Agile was created because of the pitfalls and downfalls of a traditional waterfall methodology. You see, with waterfall, there's various phases, and you can't move to the next phase until that previous phase is complete. And once you've moved past a phase, it's very difficult to go back to a previous phase. So for waterfall, you need to identify all the requirements up front. Then you need to model and analyze all those requirements. Then you need to develop some type of solution that meets those requirements. Then you go through the testing and move to production phases. But if you're already in the development or testing and you identify some changes, to go back, it takes a lot of work for that team to go back to requirements and push that as a separate piece through that waterfall process. As well, because of having to do those things step by step by step, the value isn't delivered to the end user and to the customer until the end of the process. And so it causes a lot of problems. As well with waterfall, it's a much longer period to deliver any type of value or gain any feedback from the users or the customer that have ultimately asked for this solution. Because you have to gather all the requirements, go through design, development, and testing, that is months, sometimes years, to actually receive some type of solution that may or may not meet that business need. Agile was created to help solve those problems. The number one thing that Agile does is it allows you to deliver that value in smaller increments to the customer. Not only does the customer or that end user get to start utilizing that solution and seeing that value, but also they get to give you feedback. They really like it, or they don't really like it, or this should be adjusted, or the business has changed and now we said this, but it needs to really be this now. Agile allows you to do that. You deliver that little bit of value, you gain that critical feedback that will change and adjust the way you move forward on your project, and it really helps to solve a lot of those problems before they become big problems. And because Agile is more of an iterative process, the team, the project team, is actually able to get feedback on their performance as well. The project team can understand what they could do differently and what they could adjust to make them even more successful and make their solution even more successful. So now that we've talked about some of the benefits of Agile, why aren't all companies using this? What are some of the challenges to using Agile? Well, the first thing is Agile is actually difficult for existing companies and organizations to implement if they're using some type of methodology like waterfall or other methodology today. And the biggest reason is Agile changes everything. It really has to change the whole mindset of the company. It sometimes has to change the organizational structure, has to change the way people and teams in various roles work with each other, and it really has to be an all or nothing process. So a lot of companies will kind of go into and want to move into Agile, and they'll do it half-heartedly because, oh yeah, we want to get better and we want our solutions to be out faster and we want to receive all those benefits of using it. But they do it half-heartedly, and in the end, years down the line, they're still using a half agile, half non-agile approach, and let's just say it doesn't work. So that's one of the big challenges is companies have to be all in and ready to spend some money and a lot of time in making that adjustment. Now, with saying that, new companies starting up have a much easier time of making this work, and that's because they don't have existing processes or various things that need to be adjusted, and that company culture can just be built around that Agile philosophy, that Agile mindset. One of the really nice things that a lot of team members like about Agile is the real lack of documentation, honestly, that Agile really focuses more on conversation and communication than writing all these requirements out and building models and all that stuff. Agile really has that all done through, let's sit down, let's discuss it, let's hammer it out, and then we'll move forward on whatever is decided there. That can pose some real challenges when the project's over and now you have maybe a support team handling this solution that was created. Well, if there's not any real documentation to tell that support team how it works or some of the common things that come up, it can be a big challenge for them to actually learn and support that particular solution. And while we're talking about documentation, another challenge for the lack of documentation is reusing features or components. In a traditional methodology such as waterfall, you're documenting those features out. You're documenting about the design, you're documenting about all the analysis points that you've really thought about as you've designed it and as you've developed that solution. And that feature, that component, can be utilized on additional projects. So if you have additional projects later that are very similar, you can utilize that documentation to implement that feature on that next project. Because of Agile not having much documentation and really that information only being stored or really siloed by the project team members that worked on that particular project, it can be much more difficult in Agile to take a feature from a previous project and successfully apply it to the new one. And the last challenge we're going to talk about is really there's not a clear role in Agile that takes control or has ownership of that particular project. Instead, the team works together collaboratively and everybody chips in and does their part to make sure that the project meets that eventual business need. The challenge arises when the project goes off course, when it kind of goes into an area that wasn't planned for. Now there's no real role inside of that team to help bring it back. Everybody in the collaborative teams kind of looking at each other and not really sure who should be stepping up to correct the path and get back on plan. Throughout this course, we're going to be breaking down these various challenges and giving you ways to help you overcome or avoid them happening. As was mentioned earlier in the course, Agile is really a concept or a philosophy. Off of that, different organizations and companies have built various frameworks that kind of walk you through the step-by-step of how Agile is performed within that various company. And a lot of those frameworks have become methodologies such as Scrum, Kanban, and Scrumban. And those are the three most popular Agile methodologies used by companies today. In the next sections, we're going to break down each of those methodologies. We're going to start with Scrum as that's the most popular. Majority of companies that are utilizing Agile are utilizing some version of Scrum. We're then going to transition into Kanban. Kanban's a little bit different way of working through more of a continuous process rather than having various sections and segments that you'll learn about in Scrum. Scrumban is really a combination of both. A lot of companies that use Scrumban are using it as a kind of a launching point for them to get from Scrum to the Kanban methodology. But enough about me jumping into various details. Let's teach you about Scrum. Scrum is a framework for delivering, developing, and sustaining complex products. It's built on the foundations of Agile, of iterating and adapting to change.